You're listening to the Doctor Is In podcast. This is the show where you get the best tips, tricks, and nutritional hacks to help you and your family get healthier. You'll also hear what works and what doesn't work so you don't have to waste your time and money. All right, let's get started.
Hello, I'm Dr. Martin Jr.
And I'm Dr. Martin Sr.
And this is the Doctor Is In podcast, and this is episode 130. And today we're going to talk about a new study that came out on prostate cancer specifically, and we're going to share with you kind of three things that really have an impact on the health of the prostate and why we're seeing so much more prostate cancer nowadays, and how prostate cancer really is the male version of breast cancer in a lot of ways. A lot of the same things that seem to cause breast cancer also cause prostate cancer in men. So we'll talk about that. But first, let's get into the study that you were talking about this before we got on the air, and I found it interesting.
Yeah, it's quite an extensive study that actually looked at over a period of 20 years. So a long-term look at the treatment of prostate cancer versus when they decided, the oncologist or whatever had decided not to treat it, meaning just watch it, right? So there's sort of two schools of thought in the medical profession when it comes to prostate. And that is, one, the PSA test is everything. So if you have high PSA, they start investigating, probably leads to a biopsy. And then if they see any kind of cancer cell at all, you have some options. And the options, depending on who you're seeing, I see it several times a week, so I can tell you with lots of experience, here's some of the options.
Didn't I remember reading something about the guy who invented the PSA test.
Yeah. He repented in sackcloth and ashes.
How he wasn't a fan of how it was being used as kind of the gold standard in a sense, right? And how it led to a really overdiagnosis and
overtreatment
of prostates. And you see a lot of men that have been treated for prostate cancer in the past. So you have a good understanding of the negative side of these men who were probably over-aggressively treated based on high PSA tests.
Yeah. Because, let me just go back a second. And so over 20 years they found, okay, so whether you had aggressive treatment, which would include surgery, right? And a lot of men take the option, well, if I have cancer in there, any cancer cells or whatever, get rid of the thing. I don't need it anymore, right? Versus people that, maybe the decision they made or certainly made with their doctor was that they would just watch it, meaning that, we saw maybe some cancer cells or whatever, but we're going to leave it alone and just look at it and watch it, and we'll be really looking closely. And so they got 20 years of these studies. It's really fascinating that the outcome, I think, would shock a lot of people. And that is that after 20 years, whether they had surgery or whether they chose not to have surgery, the mortality didn't change. So meaning that surgery did not improve the outcome of that cancer. And, of course, the side effects of surgery
that's the thing.
Are legion.
The mortality may not have changed, but the quality of life difference between the two choices would have been.
Oh, yeah, big time. And look, some people can have radical surgery, have the prostate removed. Very few people do well with that. Men usually that have their prostate removed become impotent. They no longer are able to have sex. I mean, that is common. And I don't know if doctors, I talked to a patient the other day, so just to give you a little bit of what I see in the office, a guy come in, he was told he had prostate cancer, and he wanted to know what, my thoughts were. And I talked to him about this study. I just told him about my experience with it. And he said, Doc, the thought of me, and he was 55, so, 11 years younger than I am, the thought of him, his sex life would be over, really bothered him. I get some men coming in and go, you know what, take it out, I don't care anymore, right? But for him, he was, a young guy, 55 years old, still pretty young. And he said, Doc, I can't, that bothers me. And I said, well, yeah, I mean, and you almost for sure are going to be, if you get a radical surgery done, whether they take it out robotically, they do now. I mean, it's a lot less invasive than it used to be. They're better at it, blah, blah, blah. But you still don't have a prostate.
No, that's right. It's still...
and your prostate is there for a reason, right?
Yeah, so they also have a lot of issues. A lot of them end up having to wear diapers.
Yeah.
They have a lot of issues that way.
Mm-hmm.
And it has a huge effect on the quality of their life afterwards. So it's one of those things. When the PSA test came out, they went crazy with it, and every man over a certain age had their PSA checked, and a lot of false positives, tons of false positives.
Yeah.
And first they were kind of over aggressively treating everything, a lot of surgeries, and then I remember reading research started coming out that maybe they should slow down a little bit.
Yeah.
And
even having biopsies, right?
Well, and that's another interesting thing as well, right? There's a lot of controversy sometimes on a biopsy itself, right? You read a lot of different things on, so you get a PSA test done, it shows that it's high, and then they want to do a biopsy to confirm it. And a lot of times those biopsies can cause issues as well afterwards. So,
and plus, there's false positives on biopsies. Because, when you think of it, you're taking, like who doesn't, you and I have talked about this in the past. To see that your body fights cancer every day,
And this is the thing, right? A lot of times, modern medicine has done a lot of good things. And a lot of times, though, we're over-treated in a lot of ways. So imagine this. For a good analogy would be taking a picture, in a sense. Like you get these testing done. You get a PSA test done. You get a biopsy done. And it's kind of like a snapshot in time, right? Like you're 55 years old, you've had 55 years. They take a snapshot at that time. And maybe at that time it was an issue, but how many times in life, and I remember reading different articles and different studies on this, and how many times in life you fight off cancer or you fight off something, right? So
you
what
fight
happens
off infection.
Yeah, so, a person may have been in the process of dealing with this, fighting it off, and they would have never have known. And they would have been none the wiser. And then they go, and it just so happened that they get this testing done, and it shows a problem, and they get a biopsy, and then they get it treated over aggressively. And, the study you pointed to kind of backs that up a little bit, that the same mortality rate had they done nothing for 20 years. And when you say they did nothing, they did nothing. It wasn't like they were taking supplements or
not like what we're going to talk about in a few minutes.
They did nothing.
How to protect your prostate.
So, I mean,
right?
you may be able to swing it the other way. Now, listen. We're not saying not to get tested. We're not saying that. We're not saying that at all. However, what we are saying is that the body is an amazing machine that was built, right? It's an amazing machine. It can fight off a lot of things. I remember, my background is a lot of sports injuries, and I remember even when the MRI unit came out, right? So, I mean, the MRI is an amazing machine for imaging. It's fantastic, right? So what happened is that the MRI machine came out, and everybody with back pain, their doctor was sending them to get an MRI. And what was happening was...
lots of surgeries, right?
Yeah, so they'd get the MRI results, and all these people had bulging discs. They had bulging discs and a lot of surgeries. And then after a period of time, they realized that even a high percentage of healthy individuals have some form of bulging discs. It wasn't causing it wasn't causing their back pain. Yeah. And that's the problem, right? A lot of times they get these things, these imagings done, and they find out without starting a firestorm. The same thing is with the mammogram in a lot of ways, right? A lot of false positives. A lot of false positive mammograms, and there's a lot of research. Just go look it up. Go. We don't have to tell you about it. Go look it up. It's same thing. We can be over-imaged. We can be over-tested. Especially, this is kind of the problem today is that the medical community has this idea that early detection is the best form of prevention. And, that's what if you catch it early enough, you could treat it, you can fix it, and you can get on your way. And I'm not disagreeing with that. But sometimes what they're detecting is never going to be an issue in the first place. Yeah. Or your body would have fought. You just don't know.
Well, what man, right, over the age of 50, doesn't have some swelling of the prostate? I mean, it's just very, very, very normal, right? Men, when you get up to pee, men, that you never peed when you were a young guy and you wonder, wow, now I got to get up at night, especially if I drink a lot of water or whatever, I'm going to be, I'm up once or twice a night. Well, does that mean you're diseased? No, it means it's inflamed. It's bigger than it used to be, right?
And, one of the, we talk about this in anti-aging, but one of the things that happens as you age is that your organs and everything becomes more insulin resistant, right? So things grow. That's a normal thing. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But and that's just kind of the only thing. Again, we're not
we're not telling you not to
we're not telling you not to do that at all. We're just saying
PSA tested, get it tested. I got no issue with that. We're just giving info.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because we'll get a couple of emails from people that are saying that we're anti-testing, and that's not the case at all.
And we're not even anti-surgery. If you make that decision to have, for a man, and a lot of times, we know a lot of women are listening to this. You often are the ones that know more about health than men. I'm not picking on men, but I am.
No, they'll do the research, right?
Women are, much more, we know that just generally that women are much more interested. So we just want to give it, the podcasts are all about giving information, right? And looking at these things and getting you to think, we want people to look at stuff and to think. But, it's interesting because, I can just tell you that I have always had this opinion. As long as I've been in practice, I've always said you're better off in 99% of cases of prostate to watch it, to observe it, to leave it alone, to see. Because most prostate cancers are not aggressive at all.
No, and I remember reading one researcher saying that you're more likely to die with prostate cancer than from prostate cancer. This one researcher was saying it's kind of like an ebb and flow thing. It just kind of comes and goes at any given time at an older age. And there were a lot of people that have probably died over the years that their cause of death was a heart attack, but they may have prostate, and they didn't even know they had prostate cancer. Yeah. Because there are some form of prostate cancers that are very aggressive, right? There's a connection of veins from the prostate that goes pretty much right up to your brain. It could travel very quickly, but that's a very minority. A lot of these are men that have, swollen prostate, and they remove them, right? Especially early on. I think things are hopefully changing a little bit. They definitely were over-aggressive for a while. But, all right, let's now that we've talked about that study, let's talk about really the three things not from a nutritional standpoint, but more from a hormonal aspect, in a sense, that happens, right? Because, you and I have talked about this, but in a lot of ways, prostate cancer is kind of like the breast cancer for men.
Are we the only ones that have ever said that? I haven't read that anywhere. I really haven't. There isn't, in terms of hormonal therapy for the prostate cancer. And by the way, some oncologists do that there's hormonal therapy. But they actually say that prostate cancer and breast cancer are very, very similar types of cancers, causation and that. But anyway, I don't know if we're the only ones that have ever said it.
So let's talk about really three hormonal changes that occur that impact the prostate and really can cause some issues. The first being testosterone. So why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Well, testosterone makes you a man, obviously, right? And testosterone, you always look at things in balance, okay? So, women are much more acute in terms of balance of hormones because they got lots of moving parts, between their thyroid and their estrogen and their adrenals, and everything's connected in there. And women are really much more complicated. But men, your prostate will be healthy, men, generally, almost without exception, if you have good elevated levels of testosterone. So testosterone is very, very important for the prostate. And your prostate usually will be quite healthy if your levels of testosterone are good. And if you have good levels of testosterone, it minimizes your womanly hormone, which is estrogen. Now, men, sometimes that shocks men when I tell them that in the office.
That's really
right?
the second hormone, which we'll talk about in a second. But again, one of the issues that happens as you age, we talk about this anorexia of aging, right? Certain things shrink, certain things waste away as we age. And, one of the problems that happens is that, once you get over around that age of 30, your testosterone levels start to naturally decrease every year, right? So you lose a percentage of
What did you say? We're fighting a losing battle.
Yeah, we're fighting a losing battle when it comes to testosterone.
Yeah.
So it's only natural in a sense that as your testosterone levels lower as you age, that your prostate problems increase as you age. One of the things that you would want to do strategy-wise is to minimize the
loss of testosterone.
Exactly. You want to minimize the loss of testosterone. You want to definitely stop doing things that are lowering testosterone. And you want to do things that would help slow that natural loss and make sure that the levels are normal. There are a lot of men who are having some serious testosterone issues, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's a
very common.
Very, very common. And the problem, again, it's kind of like fat and saturated fat. You know, saturated fat's such a terrible name. It sounds so bad, right?
Yeah.
It just, old-time medicine has destroyed saturated fat. Everybody, you hear it and you think it sounds bad. It sounds like a villain in a movie, right?
Yeah.
No matter what you do. It doesn't matter what research comes out with saturated fat, people are scared of it. It's like testosterone in a lot of ways as well. Testosterone has a bad connotation to it. He's high. He's got a lot of testosterone. Like that's cause.
Anger. Right?
Yeah, that's the cause of their problems because he's got high testosterone. No, the guy's just a jerk, right? Has nothing to do with his testosterone level. He's just a jerk. But we've equated that with testosterone.
Yeah.
Also, we think of testosterone as a performance-enhancing drug. So it's got a negative thing, right? We talk about elevated testosterone levels, and people think cheater, steroids, or you got
Sammy Sosa.
Yeah,
I'm mentioning the Cubs because I want to bug you.
I'm a big Cubs guy, but it's interesting. You're right. I mean, that's what you think about when you think about testosterone. But the reality is, a lot of men and a lot of women have low testosterone. A lot of men have low testosterone, and they have low testosterone because as they're aging, their energy's decreasing. They're not as strong. They don't feel the vitality that they used to have. Their sex drive has fallen off the table. They're not sleeping as well as they used to. There's a whole whack of symptoms that go along with that. That's a very common thing. Mm-hmm. And again, unfortunately, not a lot of doctors check for testosterone. I mean, they just don't check for that. And we'll talk about a little bit at the end of this, a few things you can do
to elevate it,
to help elevate testosterone. Yeah. So the first hormone that kind of works against a guy in his prostate is testosterone.
Yep.
The second, you mentioned it, which is estrogen, which is kind of funny, right? I mean, estrogen and testosterone kind of have this yin and yang type of thing, and one goes up, one goes down. But the reality is today, because of the amount of plastics in the environment, the amount of scents, chemicals, all these chemicals that mimic estrogen, men,
shampoos, all the phthalates, and you name it, right?
We're struggling with estrogen-like chemicals, and it's causing an estrogen dominance in men, which is affecting our testosterone levels, and estrogen as well. And I'll say this, a lot of men end up with a prostate cancer because of estrogen metabolizing issues, just like breast cancer for women. A lot of breast cancers are, they have a lot of breast cancers have a lot more estrogen receptors, a lot more insulin receptors as well, which we'll talk about in a second. But it's interesting. Estrogen is a big problem for men, which is why one of the things we like to do for swollen prostates also is recommended. We use our hormonal support from it, like a DIM.
DIM. I take it every day.
Yeah, it's fantastic, right? It helps with estrogen metabolism. It's one of those things that
blocks the extra estrogen, right?
So that's a major problem for a lot of men as well. A lot of men have low testosterone, and then it coupled to make it worse, they got elevated estrogen. So it's even a double whammy. It makes things so much worse for them. So they end up with a lot of prostate issues. And the third hormone that really kind of caps it off is the person has high circulating insulin.
Yeah.
And the reason why that's a problem is because we've said this a lot, but we'll say it again. Insulin is a growth hormone. It's a very powerful growth hormone. It makes things grow. I mean, bodybuilders for years have tried to manipulate insulin levels to help them grow their muscles because it's a tremendous growth hormone. It's very, very anabolic. Makes sense. As you age, if you have high circulating insulin, it only makes sense that certain things start to grow, and your prostate seems to be very sensitive to insulin, and it grows. So you have these men that have high insulin, they got high estrogen, and their prostate just explodes.
And if they have extra weight, right? And insulin is, like it's the big fat storer, right?
Well,
plus
insulin, estrogen,
right?
Low testosterone. It's kind of like
it's the triad, right? Of the trifecta for prostate cancer, really, when you really look at it, right?
And that's...
You gotta write a book about that.
Yeah, we'll have to add that to the list of books that we want to write.
But I just had that idea. I like that idea, the trifecta, right?
But you're right. I mean, that the combination of those three, those are lifestyle. Those are things, and the nice thing is with that is those are things that you can control by diet, by doing certain things, right? We talked about lowering estrogen. We talked about improving testosterone. So let's from a nutrient standpoint, there are two very common deficiencies that, majority of the population has, a lot of men especially. And those two deficiencies definitely cause low testosterone.
Yep.
And first one, vitamin D.
Vitamin D is essential for you can't have good levels of testosterone unless you have good levels of vitamin D. They go hand in hand. So vitamin D, we're always talking about it. It's very important, right? Remember, vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. And this is why you and I are big into eating, making sure you get enough fat in your diet, because you're not going to absorb vitamin D without, it's a fat-soluble vitamin. It's very important. So, to go fat-free like our society did and it's one of the reasons. It's one of the reasons, not the only reason. It's one of the reasons that prostate cancer is on the rise big time, is that people avoid fat like the plague. And you're not absorbing vitamin D without it. You just need, it's a fat-soluble vitamin. That's why I like peanut butter and vitamin D for me.
I got a feeling you'd like peanut butter anyways.
Yep.
And the second nutrient that men are deficient in, and women, but it really impacts the level of testosterone, is zinc. Such a common deficiency.
Yeah.
And we don't talk a lot about zinc because there's so many other things we talk about.
Yeah.
But zinc's another one.
Where do you find it, though?
Well,
what foods?
And really that's the thing, right? I mean, unfortunately, again, we don't care. I mean, there are a lot of people that are vegetarian or vegan that they can eat a low carb lifestyle, and they can eat a low carb, higher fat, and get enough protein. But there's a lot of people that are eating a vegan lifestyle or a vegetarian lifestyle that aren't getting the nutrients. They're just not getting them. Yeah. They're not getting, and that's the problem, right? Because zinc is found
in
that's the
eggs,
thing.
meat, and cheese.
Eggs, meat, and cheese. That's where you get a lot of zinc. Yeah. I mean, you start cutting those things out of your diet and this is what happens to a lot of men. They end up, as they get older, because of high circulating insulin, by the way, they end up with high blood pressure. They go to their doctor, and the doctor says, got to stop eating salt and red meat and stop eating eggs, cholesterol foods.
Cholesterol, yeah.
So they scare them, and then they stop eating all those things. And next thing you know, they're eating like all these low-fat foods, and they're not getting any zinc anymore. And it's creating these deficiencies. They're not getting any vitamin D because they're scared of the sun, because their doctor's telling them to stay out of the sun. And as it doesn't take long before the prostate starts to grow, to explode.
Yeah.
Testosterone levels fall down. They don't feel good anymore. For a long time, we've been giving this bad advice. So if you're listening and you're vegetarian or you're vegan, you're going to have a harder time getting those nutrients.
Yeah. And so just supplement.
You got to supplement.
I mean, look, if you're, for some people, they can't even digest meat, right? Like it bothers them. Or I had a lady in this morning, that it bothered. I said, well, look, if it bothers you, I don't want you to eat it. Like if you can't take eggs, some people can't have eggs.
Well, I can't eat eggs.
Yeah, you can't eat eggs, right? Your mother can't have eggs. So, you know what? Well, then you substitute. What's in
and you
an
better
egg,
be prepared to. That's right. You better be prepared to supplement.
Yeah, you got to take a supplement. That's what they're called. They're called supplements. You supplement your diet with that. It's like B12. It's an essential vitamin, and we just say, well, look, if you're not eating red meat, you're going to be low in it. So just take a sublingual B12.
All right. Well, we want to thank you for listening to this episode. If you have any questions, you can email us at info@martinclinic.com. Also, every Thursday morning you do a Facebook Live, so you can go to our Facebook page, sign up there, or follow us on Facebook. You'll get notifications about the Facebook Lives. Great way to come and ask you questions. And if you're not a newsletter subscriber, go to our website, martinclinic.com, and just sign up for our newsletters. And we talk about a lot of these studies every week. So again, we want to thank you for listening, and have a nice day.